We all know inflation sucks, but because of the nature of the modern banking system and the Fed, not many people even think about deflation. This is when the value of your currency rises compared to goods and services in the market. Essentially, this happens when there is economic growth but no additional currency in the market, so more economic activity is chasing the same amount of currency. So we know that inflation crushes both companies and workers, but what would deflation do? The situation I am describing is one where it is impossible or illegal to increase the overall number of dollars or other currency denomination in the market. This means you cannot print money or otherwise grow the money supply in any way. Many cryptocurrencies have a set total quantity that cannot be increased. So for this thought experiment, we are assuming that situation exists in the dominant currency in use. Well, in a limited denomination currency like the dollar, there are some problems that could arise. It becomes harder to split the dollar into component parts, the more each part is worth. So at a certain point, you will have price distortion as people start using half dollars, quarters, and nickels as dollars. If your deflation reaches a truly extreme place and people start using pennies as dollars, you have created a problem where resource prices cannot easily be found, and market distortion, similar to bubble dynamics, will begin to form. But if you had an infinitely divisible currency, such as Bitcoin, it wouldn't be an issue. You could simply start doing business in smaller and smaller fractions of your original currency. As many of you know, I am ardently against mandatory digital currency because of its extreme capacity for abuse by a government authority. But if that currency is not managed by a single authority and can't be inflated, and people can't be locked out of their accounts for accusations and social credit or other reasons, then the risk of such a currency is somewhat mitigated. I think in such a situation, accepting physical cash payments should always be essential for freedom. But in terms of economics, there are many advantages to a currency that cannot be inflated and is infinitely divisible. Infinitely divisible simply means you can break it into smaller and smaller components. This is why when you send $1 of Bitcoin to somebody, there are many zeros after the dot before the number you are talking about. Under a system with impossible printing and thus immune to absolute numerical inflation, any growth in the economy would translate to deflation. From a worker's standpoint, this would be amazing. Set wages would constantly rise in absolute value by remaining stagnant in numerical value. This is the opposite of our current situation, where stagnant wages means falling compensation in absolute terms. Under inflation, you are paid in dollars that are constantly worth less. Under deflation, you are paid in currency that is constantly worth more. Even a few percentage points of a rise would still mean falling wages as inflation has reached unprecedented levels. Under a new system like this, the company would need to write into their employment contracts that they could lower wages based on set deflationary markers that would require an active choice on the company's part. Essentially, to not give a raise in that situation would require a corporate choice, where presently to give a raise or even keep you at the same compensation level requires a choice. This raises the power of workers as the burden of action is in their favor. Likewise, this allows for active resource and input adjustments as the economy becomes more powerful and demands increase. The only major disadvantage of such a system would be that operating costs would continue to rise, but that is what happens anyway as demand increases. The difference is that today, rising costs are skewed and hidden because of inflation. An interesting component to infinite deflation is that wages and profits made early are given a huge advantage in comparison to future profits. Any retained earnings you have now will be worth more as time advances, creating a massive incentive for people to get off their couch and make as much as they can as quickly as they can, as cash itself becomes an incredible investment. But this doesn't mean that future work will lack this incentive, as now is simply the early point for the future. And every new day is the new now. and the money you make now will still be worth more in the future. This is true for both company profits and individual wages. Operating costs and resource prices would be constantly adjusting downward on the numerical scale, but remain in equilibrium from an absolute economic perspective. This means that profits you make from your wage job could far more easily be turned into long-term investments and/or used to start your own business. In such a stable and reliable system, transitioning from labor class to the capital and business owner class becomes so easy as to be determined almost entirely by desire and patience rather than a stroke of luck or political connections as it does today. Our current economic situation disincentivizes saving and investment both from a regulatory and tax perspective and from an inflationary and practical perspective. It is well known that consumerism and the current power structure wants the normal people to spend everything they make, remain in debt, and work tirelessly as wage slaves. This isn't a leftist critique of capitalism, it is a general critique of cronyism. The same problems exist in all authoritarian systems, just by different names and with different ways of enumerating the power imbalance between the controlled and the controllers. Capitalism, when freed from the rampant regulation and bureaucratic control of oppressive government, is toxic to monopolies and megacorporations. They can only exist in an ecosystem created by government. They rely on special loopholes just for them, special deals, and barriers to entry. Without these advantages, they can't compete with the innovation and competition that naturally arises in the market. If you would like to know more about this, please watch my video on megacorporations. Megacorporations also love inflation because inflation results in the constant lowering of resource prices, requiring their suppliers and employees to constantly ask for more. With the power dynamics of megacorporations, asking for more is arduous and virtually impossible. Their legal teams can delay contract negotiations, and individual workers have very little power when all the small businesses go out of business and the only option is the megacorporations or no work. Inflation and bureaucracy are the paragon of toxic pills for the free market. The fact that we still have something resembling a free market despite our current government and currency situation is a testament to the power of capitalism and the determined spirit of the American people. But nothing can survive being poisoned forever. We must fix the currency and the bureaucracy, or at some point the system will crumble in on itself and our hope and freedom will go along with it. Political freedom relies on economic freedom. You do not have the time, energy, or means to speak your mind or arm yourself if you do not have the finances to feed yourself and fund your activism. Once they have crushed the economy, they can more easily move on our other rights. We must find a way to reverse this inflation and prevent the implementation of CBDC, because that, above all else, would be the economic and political death stroke that would spell the end of not just personal property and capitalism, but all of our rights. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.